skeeters, scooters.
Okay. You can look at me. We'll just have a little conversation here.
I don't want to lose my phone. Should turn it off, right? Somehow. Put it on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we talked last night, a couple of things I was curious about, I want to ask you about. First of all, you said that when you first started playing the tenor, Al Cohn was the person you wanted to emulate. What did you hear in Al's sound?
Well, it was interesting. The basic reality is I didn't know much, and like Philadelphia, there were a lot of like all the white saxophone players. Most of the white saxophone players were like idolized Al Cohn. He was like a cult figure in a way, and so it was Frank Tabiri. There was a guy, I'm trying to remember names of people. Frank was, I go to a record store and I run into Frank and I say, which record should I buy? I didn't have enough money to buy a lot. Anyway, so I kind of attracted to something about the sound I kind of liked. So I got a saxophone when I was 15. I played a little flute and little clarinet. So I picked up the saxophone. I knew exactly what I wanted to sound like, which is a lesson to a lot of young people. I said, you have to find out what you would like to sound like. You can practice 12 hours a day. If you don't have a concept of sound, you'll never get anywhere. So I had this sound. I'm working real hard. I never forgot my first day with the tenor. I know the mouthpiece. I remember the mouthpiece, the reed, and I'm working, and I got in my own mind, I got kind of close, I got a start. So that was, that was it. And then I got to hear them, and hear Alan Zoot come to Philly. I was underage, but I used to sneak in the clubs, and they don't really. In Philadelphia, they weren't worried about that. They were worried about junkies. So I'd be in a club sipping a beer, and like these guys come in, you knew they were. They weren't normal people, and I get real nervous. But they didn't care about you breaking the drinking laws or whatever. They were just trying to bust guys. The Philadelphia Police Vice Squad was notorious. It's horrible.
They did a number on Lenny Bruce.
They did a number on a lot of people, Bud Powell, and so many people. Anyway, that's another story. But I was, that was my first. Very grateful, and I started playing the tenor. I could never even play. How Al used to. He never played like a kind of a regular tone in the low register. It was like a subtone kind of a thing. So I played like that. I remember taking an audition to get a scholarship, and I played. I show up with a flute, clarinet, and a tenor. And I'm playing the tenor, and the guy says, "Oh, you always play subtone on the tenor." That's all I knew. Many years later, I had a gig with Maynard Ferguson, of all people, and he started trying to get into pseudo rock and roll world. So he had Don Sebesky or something write this thing, and we're playing like saxophones are playing like bass lines. I never had to do that, and my jaw started to hurt. I said, well, after a week of that, I said, well, then all of a sudden I had a quote unquote normal low register attack, and that was it. And also playing Latin gigs with the Montunas going on and on. So anyway, that's now I play like, well, moving on. But when I heard Don Bias play, records, I felt there was a way to play with volume, and and not sound like a duck in the low register. So to use a lot of air and be able to play basically what I call a modified subtone, like a loud subtone, which is contradiction in terms, but anyway. So that was Al Cohn, and then my next hero was Sonny Rollins. I mean, I started to hear other guys, and Hank Mobley and Sonny Rollins, I could identify, and then Coltrane became, fashion, and so I was kind of going in and out. I used to listen to Sonny Rollins, and I'd work on things like, I would work on motif development. I'd play a phrase and then I'd bring it back at a certain point or develop it. I was aware of maybe not completely intellectually, but I was aware of how to develop a solo, and especially in those days when you played for a long time, it was, you have a long duration. You can't just be playing stupid stuff all the time. I would send the part of myself to check me out, and listen to me. I have an out of body experience. I would produce it, and report would come back. Boy, you really did something stupid on the third chorus. That was really dumb. Don't do that. So I used to work on that, and I used to work on how to lay back on the time or mess with the time. I didn't know it intellectually, but that's what I tried to do. So that was very important. And then Coltrane came. I actually tried to emulate Coltrane. I was like 20 years old, and and then I was pretty good. I could pretty much get the sound, and then I started thinking about it. I said, what a stupid thing to do, and I hear other white guys trying to play like Train, and I said, boy, they sound dumb, and I said, maybe I sound just as dumb. So there was a guy, trombone player, was a little bit older than me, who had a record collection. He's totally, he was into jazz history, etc. So he invited me to his house, and he played all his recordings of all the great tenor players. And he played Lester. Now, how can you not like Lester? I mean, classic Lester is Mozart. I mean, classic Lester is perfection beyond perfection. I said, wow, that's great. I never heard it. And he played Ben Webster. Wow, that's another world. And he played Hawkins. I couldn't understand Hawkins. Hawkins is too complicated for me at this stage. I couldn't deal with the sense of time and the harmony. Harmony was too complicated. And anyway, he played Bias. I heard Bias. I said, wow, I didn't know anybody could play the saxophone like that. Because guys that played fast, quote unquote, usually had a smaller sound. Because when you have a big sound, it's hard to execute rapidly. So you get guys like Sonny Stitt who cut the sound down, and it kind of worked better. I heard all these people, and it kind of changed my life, because I started to do some more investigation. I would work on trying to take the essence of each player. Like you hear Lester, there's a certain buoyancy. It wasn't a question of transcription or anything. It was just trying to, by osmosis, take in the character of the way they played. And I listened to all the stuff, and at a certain point, the light bulb went off on Hawkins. I was able to, I said, wow, now I understand. That's the root of everything. And I got Chu Berry. I checked out Chu Berry. And then when I would go later in the years, when I go to hear Sonny play, I said, that's it. That's the truth. I said, because I could hear the elements. I said, that's Lester. That sounds like Lester. Those 8 bars sound like Lester. That sounds like Hawkins. That's Byrd. And so I learned that the way to go about it is you put all these influences and put it in a pot, stir it up, and they're there, but ultimately, eventually you come out of that. Your personality comes out of it. So that's in a nutshell, that's kind of how I tried to develop. And then I remember playing in Nice, and I'm playing, and Jimmy Heath came over and said, "Hey man, yeah, you sound great. You really, your sound has gotten bigger and everything is blah, blah, blah." And he said, "But you're 40 now." And I thought about that. And it seems to be the magic number these days. Like maybe in years past it was 25 because people were playing all the time. Now it takes longer. And when I moved to New York, Zoot Sims helped me in, certain ways. There's a lot of stories. But one night, I'm at half note, he's playing and comes off the bandstand. He treated me like an equal. I always like feel almost emotional about, my relationship with him. He's like a big brother. And Al would be more like a father figure. Zoot could never be a father figure. So, and he's real serious, and he says, the first time in my life when I'm on the bandstand, I feel confident. And I'm thinking, what? I mean, he'd been playing along. He always sounded great, and I couldn't believe that he felt that way. Then I began to think about it. And this is, in retrospect, I began to think about it because he was probably around 40. And there's something happens when you learn to accept your idiosyncrasy. In the past, you try to destroy it. You have this concept of perfection, and you don't want that thing that you do to get in the way. And that thing that you do, don't do that, kind of thing. Benny Goodman kind of thing. So it's like, it's kind of interesting. And then then you start to, when you hear a song in your head, you don't hear Sonny Rollins playing it or Hawkins playing it, you hear yourself playing it. And then you realize that you finally move from being a fan or, you're always a student, but being, to get into yourself and still try to correct things and develop things, but, allow yourself to have your individuality.
Well, one of the things that jazz is about individuals. It's about the uniqueness of your individual playing. The masters, when we hear them, we can identify them in, just a couple of notes. I mean, it's that powerful. But particularly the tenor saxophone, so many unique voices. What do you think it is about the tenor that lends itself to everything from Lester Young to Big Nick Nicholas?
Well, because it's, there's a lot of theories about that. And one of the theories is that it's more in the male vocal register, where the alto is not. It's maybe some people, but basically it's a natural instrument to. I don't know how it relates to females, but there's something about it that allows you to create your personality easier. It's very natural. It transcends the technical easier than, like, say, the alto. I think it's more technical in a way, and tenor is just like, it's more easier to become an extension of you. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I'm sure there are a lot of theories about it. Maybe I don't know, but that's my theory.
Yeah. Could you walk us through, you're in the Army, you get out, you work at whatever period of time in organ trios, and then you get to New York. Could you talk about that period of your life?
I was in the Army, and I got drafted 63, got out in 65, and at that time, Tal Farlow he came out of retirement, and he's playing this club in Asbury Park, Bill Green's, I think it was called. And Don Friedman and would come in from New York, the bass player from New Jersey, Vinnie Burke, and the drummer who later became a roommate. He was Arnie Major. Actually, his name was Magyar, a Hungarian name. So I would go and Tal would let me sit in, and like that's how I met. I have a funny story about that. But it's so easy to digress, you know. But it's kind of connected.
Let's hear it.
I'm playing so I would play, and I'm playing, you know, I'm stupid. I'm playing too long, and, you know, you're young, you're really dumb. But Tal was cool, you know, and I didn't get a lot of heat. But one night I'm playing there, and I get off the bass, and this guy who almost attacked me. He said, "Man, I came from New York to hear Tal Farlow, not you." He said, "You play good, man, but I didn't come to hear you." That was Attila Zoller. You know, Attila was kind of a tough guy, you know. So that was it. Meanwhile, Don, you know, I was talking to Don. I said, "Yeah, I had saved up." I said, "I'm planning to move to New York. I would do these organ trio gigs in Asbury Park, get my $30 a week unemployment from the Army, you know, thing. Saved up $400 and moved to New York." And Don told me, he said, "Yeah, you can go to this place called the Dom and sit in." So first night in New York, I did that, and for me it took a lot because I was always like, you know, I wasn't that aggressive. So I'd come in and I hear this tenor saxophone playing. It didn't sound that great to me, so it gave me some confidence. So I go over to Tony Scott and say, "Can I play?" He said, "Who are you, man?" I said, "My name is Lew Tabackin. Don Friedman suggested I come," and he says, let's see what you can do. I mean, that's really cool. So I'm advancing, and Philly Joe is playing, and in the front row is a bunch of guys who recognize Kenny Dorham, and they're standing there like jury, and I'm trying to play, and I can hear the comments. Kenny Dorham, "Yeah, it sounds like he practices a lot," you know, all that stuff. Anyway, somehow I passed the audition, so I was able to go there, you know, and sit in whenever I wanted to, and so that was then. To extend Attila Zoller's story, about less than a year later, Attila calls me to play in his group, you know, and make a record. And so we became really good friends, and I used to tell that story about, you know, I came to hear Tal Farlow, like you, and he'd get mad. And many years later, we played a big concert. I think it was A.B. Fisher Hall, and with the big band, and we had a little party afterwards, and Attila said, "Tonight I came to hear you." So it was. Now I could tell the story, but that's a digression. But that's so I moved to New York, and you know, I had $400, and I found an apartment in one day. You know, I looked at 3. I found one, and you could go in the paper, like the Daily News, and find. So, moved to 93rd Street between the West End and Riverside, which turned out to be the same block that Herbie Hancock lived in. A couple other musicians. This guitar player across the street, Joe Beck. Right around the corner was Garrison. Joe Newman was over there, and a lot of musicians. So I just fell into that. I didn't know that, and so, you know, I lived there, and I used to go to Jim and Andy's, and I'd see all the guys I just saw on record, on the backs of records. It was kind of exciting, and I never forget one of my first nights hanging out. I'm sitting at the bar with Ruby Braff, of all people. Now, I mean, I had heard him play, and I thought he was great. He was a real individual, and I had a, you know, kind of a, my concept, my fantasy of what who he was. You know, it's so hard to separate how people play and who they are. I mean, how they act or whatever, which is the truth. Trying to find out the truth. So I'm hanging out with Rudy Braff, and I'm telling him all this shit, like, you know, all my naive bullshit that I was dumping on him, and he was so gracious, and like, I know I was saying a lot of things that he disagreed with or hated. When I got to know him years later, I realized that I asked him, I said, Ruby, I remember hanging out with you in 1965 and talking to you, and you were really nice to me, and you didn't, you know, dump on me. I know I said things that probably offended your sensibility. You know? He said, yeah, I knew, but I mean, I knew we needed a Lew Tabackin here. And then years later, he actually liked me. He said, I did a gig at Carnegie Hall. George Wayne asked me to do this thing, Buck Clayton, because Buddy Tate was sick. And anyway, Ruby wasn't involved in it. And he said, man, you played so great, man, like, you know, at this thing. And he heard me a few times. Yeah, you played great, but you have to stop playing that avant-garde shit. But anyway, it's interesting. So, you know, the Jim and Annie's world, some of the guys were really nice, and some of the guys that were supposed to be nice were terrible. Billy Root, Philadelphia, he said, yeah, when you come to New York, look up Richie Kamuka. He'll help you out, you know. Man, he was a drag. He was not nice to me. And he would send my friends that were still in Philadelphia would say, yeah, you know, Richie was saying, yeah, Lew Tabackin and Joe Farrell, they played too many notes and he's dumping on. Like, I'm basically a child in a sense, and you know, it's kind of stupid. But but most of the guys are really nice. And one Wednesday night, I'm there, and Jim and Andy's and Zoot's there, and he's drinking, he's grooving. He says, hey man, Clark's doing a rehearsal, and I really don't want to do it. Why don't you go and do it? So I go there, and it's Clark Terry's all-star band, and his saxophone section was Phil Woods, Frank West playing tenor, Danny Bank, and alto player wasn't that well known, Bobby Donovan, his name was. So I'm the only non-all-star, and all the other guys, Ron Carter's in the band, all these guys. So next week I would make it a point to be at the same, Jim and Andy's the same time, and the same, you know, and Zoot would do the same thing. So after 4 or 5 rehearsals, Phil said, I don't think Zoot wants to do this. And you're doing the rehearsal, so why don't you do the gig? And that was my first kind of situation in some kind of reality that was you know, important. And the lesson I learned, I was in the middle of not knowing how I wanted to play, in a sense. I'm playing, and I'm realizing there's something wrong with what I'm doing. You know, I'm like, not really. There's something wrong. What? And I'm trying to analyze. Nobody said anything. Like Phil didn't say, "Hey man," like I'm talking about solos, basically. I wasn't a great reader, but I could follow, so that wasn't a problem. And I just realized, and I said, you know what? I'm going to listen to Clark, and I'm going to try to get kind of grow out of his concept. So when I start a solo, I'm not saying, here I am, take it or leave it, you know. I'm going to kind of grow out of the feeling, try to create a Zen reality. And that changed a lot of, that was very important, because every time I went on different situations, I wouldn't basically change a lot, but I would just kind of like try to become one with the environment that I was in. And then you start out that way, and then you can kind of take it to a certain place if you want to. But I thought it was an important lesson. I tried to tell that to a noted tenor player who was playing with his group, and I said, man, you can't do that. And it was a straight ahead group, and all of a sudden he just goes out. I said, you can't do that. You have to grow out of the music. You can't impose yourself on the music. And I learned that a long time ago, and I tried to tell him. I don't know if he paid any attention or if he had the ability. Some people don't have that ability. There's some great players that if they get thrown into a situation that say like it's more closer to swing, more closer to pre-bebop reality, they can't function. Like Byrd could do that. It didn't matter because you try to develop a style that encompasses a lot, almost a whole history, so that when you play, you just play. And whether it's kind of swing, kind of music. I was playing with Freddie Hubbard in Nice. Freddie Hubbard All-Stars, quote unquote, and whatever it was. And so in Nice, I don't know if you've been there, they used to do this mix and match thing, you know. They'd have maybe one set group and then everybody look at this thing, who do you play with? So I was on the thing to play with George Weins, Newport All-Stars, Slam Stewart and Oliver Jackson. I mean, Slam Stewart, I knew Slam Stewart from listening to, you know, Don Byas, Slam Stewart, I mean, you know, amazing. So when I you know, all those guys like Scott Hamilton and Warren Bechet, but they did that all the time, so they're bored with all this shit, you know, and like, I never played this, I've heard this kind of music, but I never really played it in its true sense. So I'm having a great time, you know, because to me it's like new. And so I get off the bandstand and all these Jazz Journal, British moldy fig guys, you know, kind of like used to call them, you know, the old farts of jazz. Like, hey man, we didn't know you could play like that. We thought you were avant-garde or something, you know, like that. Anything like kind of little bebop-ish and beyond is avant-garde. And so all of a sudden I got this big magazine feature and I'm on the cover and all this stuff. So although I remember one time getting a criticism from what's this critic, I forgot his name. He used to write in the Village Voice. He called me the Zelig of jazz.
That's Stanley Crouch.
Who?
Stanley Crouch?
No, not Stanley. White guy, I can see.
Michael Zwerin?
No. It'll come to me. He was involved in a band, this repertoire band. I was involved. It'll come to me.
Gary Giddens?
Yeah, Gary Giddens. I said, what a stupid thing to say. And then this young piano player, he says, well, I read the article and he didn't understand because he didn't know the context. I say, well, the guy, he doesn't understand. Like, it's like as if you like, all of a sudden you change everything that you do. You become like, you just shift gears a little bit. It's nothing, and like that's called sensitivity. And they don't understand it. See, they're the kind of people that think that you're not an artist. Only people that are artists are like geniuses, like Monk, because Monk played Monk. You know, and that was it. But they kind of negate, they kind of diminish the ability to be able to be in context, and I found that really insulting because you missed the whole point. But that comes to what I was talking about before. You know, when you listen to a lot of stuff, and then you incorporate the elements into your playing so that one element might dominate in another situation, but you're not like, because it was easy, and at one point it was relatively easy for me to do like an impersonation of like, I do a Bias, do a Ben Webster, do a Sonny Rollins, or Coltrane, whatever. Mm-hmm. Then I thought that was kind of just something that it's not important. You can't do that anymore, or you don't want to do that anymore, and it's not necessary to do that anymore. You know, I was showing somebody the other day a little something at the concert, and I was talking about Ben Webster. I had to do. John Faddis called me to do this. They were doing a performance of Black, Brown, and Beige for Ralph Ellison posthumous book party in Harlem. So I had to play. I was giving Ben Webster's part, which was a lot of it was written out. Supposedly Duke wrote out. And I'm pretty sure it was just like partially written, and you know. So I'm really trying to really do it right. So I'm working so hard to get into that world, and I thought I did a pretty good job. Problem was that I couldn't play for about a month. I couldn't get out of that world, that dark world. Toshiko has a great description of Ben Webster. He calls it tragic beauty. And it's what it is. And you get into this dark kind of emotional world, and its emotion is like, it's not like you letting out the emotion, you're keeping in the emotion when you're playing. And it's internalizing it. And I said, shit, I can't do this anymore. Because it was like, I was thinking, but if you're like quote unquote method actor, and you get into the part, and then you can't get out of the part. That's what I felt like. So that's my lesson. Don't do that. Things like, you know, birthday.
Yeah.
But that's different. You basically play some tunes that he's associated with, and you kind of, you know, you can't help but include a couple nuances here and there. You know, like I usually play. A lot of times on gigs, I play Self-Portrait of the Bean, and I do a little talk about it a little bit, because he's probably the most, amongst young musicians and fans, he's probably the most underappreciated musician. I mean, everybody knows Louis Armstrong. They don't know Coleman Hawkins, who was a real, in the true definition of avant-garde. So I try to talk about it, and I do a quasi Picasso, and I do a quote-unquote free improvisation going to the tune. I'm going to try to do that with this band, Tucson band, the high school band. I sent them a chart, you know, a transcription of that chart, Hawkins meets Duke, whatever. So anyway, I forgot what I was talking about. Like I've done a couple Zoot Sims things, but that's cool too. You don't have to, you just play. But Ben Webster was too much, too draining.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotional content there. I wanted to ask you, you know, when I talked to Sonny about improvisation and when he's just playing, for him, improvisation is meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And he just...
That's really great, yeah.
The worst thing for him is to be thinking. He doesn't want to think. What's your take on that when you're improvising?
That's perfection. Thinking gets in the way of everything, and when you're not thinking and you're just playing, I mean, it's hard to get to that stage. I've done a couple things, like I remember doing a Zen, playing in a Zen temple. They do the Zazen, and I was asked to play. And so I played my flute. And I've done this before. You play one note, say like you play a low E, and you play it like in as many possible ways you can play this note, different pitch variations, intensity, and you can kind of hypnotize yourself. And you just play, and you try to reach the non-thinking thing where you don't know, you're just playing. And you don't know how long, you don't know how long you've been playing or what you've been playing, and so that's an obvious way. Like I've always felt that way about Sonny because I've heard it a million times, and to reach that point where all this stuff just stream of consciousness stuff happens, and the only way it really works is when you're not thinking. If you're thinking or planning, it's not going to happen. You might come up with something that's acceptable, but not great. And so I think we all strive for when you're playing, the non-thinking thing, and that's when the music is the best. You can't always do it, you know. I guess it's an interesting thing to think about, because I don't do meditation, but I hear you're supposed to clear your mind, you know, not think about anything. Maybe to try to think about not thinking, you know, a little more. But that's it's like, well, I mean, I remember Sonny Rollins doing a talk on a television program, and he mentioned one thing. He said, you play a song or something, there's one little part that you don't feel comfortable with. So just take that little part, keep on playing it over and over again, working until it gets to be perfectly natural. And I really like that. I do that every so often. There's usually one part of a tune that maybe doesn't feel as natural, and you start thinking, and try to get it to the point where you don't have to think about it. So yeah, I think that says a lot, you know, the non-thinking. I mean, that's when you know, thinking gets in the way of quote-unquote artistry, if that makes any sense.
Do you know about the Buddhist concept monkey mind?
No.
Monkey mind is that little voice in your head that we all have. Some of us control it, some of us can't. Don't do that. You're no good.
Oh yeah.
All these
I've experienced it without knowing what it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's a human.
We talked about that before. I used to, you know, check myself out, and they would tell me what that was really stupid and don't do that. And, you know, yeah, I mean, that's I didn't know what the terminology was, but I've experienced it, and it's important. I try to plant that seed in to younger players. Coleman Hawkins said, "Listen to yourself when you play." It sounds obvious, but it's not that, you know. If you listen to yourself when you play, then that little voice will tell you that, oh, that note's fucked up, or don't do that, or, you know, the sound, you know, like the voices will come and, you know, you will be, you know, the self-critical part. So that's very important. Even if you're playing a fairly rapid passage, you still have to listen to yourself. Try to listen to every note, so it comes out like each note has its own little life.
Yeah. Let's talk about extended collaborations. Your trio, you guys have been together 18 years. Played together 18 years. What do you think is the benefit from working with the same musicians over a long period of time?
Well, there are a couple of benefits. One, what you just mentioned, you don't have to think a lot about things. It's not perfection, but you can start playing and feel confident that you don't have to think so much or talk too much or explain too much. That's the good part. And I guess the bad part could be that you get to be dependent on that, or also, you know, maybe there's a little close, you know, you're too intimate. But ultimately, it's really, sometimes it can be really great, because with the intimacy can really propel things. And yeah, like the thing about this group is 18 years, but not that much. It's not like we're on a road. I mean, Boris is probably the busiest musician in the world. I mean, he's like, because he's capable of so many things, and he can, so, you know, of course he does the biggest thing, but he does that's vocal group, what's the famous vocal group?
Manhattan Transfer?
Yeah. He'll do that, do all Latin gigs, and his own project. So he's working all the time. So that means that, okay, I set parameters like, okay, every September I come up with a Japanese tour. I set that up quickly so everybody can hold that. And then I set up a tour this year in May, and we do occasional gig in New York together. If Boris can't, Mark is more available. If Boris can't make it, I have other, I have substitutes. It's just different. One thing I learned though, years ago I used to play a lot with Billy Higgins. He was a master, especially in trio concept. And then once in a while I couldn't make it, and I have another drummer, and I'm still trying to play the same way. And I realized you can't do that. You have to, you can't, you have to adapt again. And I met Joey Barron in New York in Los Angeles at the time, and I didn't have to think any much differently, because his concept was in a way open and similar to Billy's in a way in those days. So, but that's, so the trio thing, it has, a lot of advantages, and we can work, I can write some, I don't write a lot, but I can write a little something. Usually concept pieces, and usually, what's the right word, narrative pieces. So we have to develop the story. So I can say, okay, I wrote this tune a long time ago called Desert Lady, and it was inspired by a Japanese movie, and Toru Takemitsu wrote the music. But just to think about what we're doing, it's not just it's very little harmony, but to build it and create this visual. And like the second tune I played last night, it was Garden and Lifetime. So we developed those tunes. We played them, and since we don't play as much as we like to, you can work on the same music and create, really tell the story and create the movie. It becomes a visual. A lot of what I grew up also in a free jazz age a little bit. And the good part of that is to try to learn to turn visual into oral. And I try to do demonstration. A lot of times I hang out with classical flute players. And I try to get some improvised. And I have a friend, one of my closest friends, is first flute player with the Chicago Symphony now. And he's fearless, so he's cool. I say, Stefan, his name is Stefan Hoskelson, and he'll try stuff, and he gets all excited too, to them. We did a little gig, and I invited him to do a gig with me in Mesro, it's a little place, and he was really nervous, and he plays all the great concert halls in the world, and he's not nervous, and so. I said, you're cool, man. And I talk about okay, let's play a painting. You look at a painting and you try to conjure up something that the painting tells you to do something. So I kind of like that, and I think a lot of the music has gotten very technical, and it's almost too technical, and where's the story? Lester Young. And so sometimes the story, I'm getting a little bit trying to reevaluate what I'm doing. I don't play consistently enough. I play in my basement a lot with jam session kind of, call it jazzercise. A lot of younger musicians that just play. But I've been thinking that maybe I have to start editing a little more, like John Lewis and I was friends with John Lewis, and we did a duet recording, and I never met him. We came to Los Angeles, and we go into the studio, Chick Corea's studio, and played, and I realized I better cool it, because I'm going to sound stupid if I, too aggressive. And so I played with my ear on the harp at the piano, because he didn't play, he played softly, and I just tried to, find the right balance. I didn't want to be totally, passive, but try to find the right balance, and I think I did. Pretty much. I was 40 years old, I guess. Just turned around 40, and it was a great experience. And John loved it. He played incredibly. He played great. I'm thinking John was a master of crystallization. And now, if I once a couple of times I hear Barry Harris play, he's like that. And I guess I'd like to work on being more like that, but I don't know. It's not that easy. You grow up in a certain way, and I used to play I played one time 2 hours straight, one tune. In the Army, we had a contest, and probably was the most horrible thing you ever heard, but it was a stamina thing. Now I can't do that, but I can still play too long, and I can still play too many notes. So that's hard. That's a challenge, Hopefully, if I keep on working at it, it's like I grew up in the existential philosophy days, with Jean-Paul Sartre and all that, and it was like the concept of in becoming. You're in the process. It's the process. So no matter how old you get, it's still the process. So that, Clark Terry's philosophy is a fine line between a groove and a grave. So that kind of fits in. Philosophy, he was a philosopher that when I was a kid, he was on one of the talk shows, late night talk shows, and someone asked him, I think maybe it was Steve Allen, one of those guys, can you explain your philosophy in a couple of sentences? He said, yeah, I think so. Maybe the human condition is you can't win, but you can try. So I wrote a tune called Chasing the Carrot, I don't know if anybody realized what that meant, but so I'm sure Byrd felt the same way, and we all feel, you're always falling short. You're never there. You're trying to get there. And I said, that's the beauty of it. So you're never finished. So I'm counting on the fact that not getting any younger and trying to create positivity out of what might be. Like I remember, Frank West. He's obviously not a spring chicken at a certain point, and he had asthma, and you get up and play, sound wonderful. He adapted his equipment to what he could handle physically, utilized the microphone. I don't do that yet. I haven't gotten to that point, but and played maybe better than ever from a musical point of view. So that's a lesson. I've learned so much from observing, people that I respect, and trying to reflect on what some of the old players did, how they screwed up. Coleman Hawkins, Zoot Sims took me to see him maybe about a year before he died, or 2 years before and he was like wearing a bathrobe, real skinny. I mean, he looked really terrible. He looked like he was 90. He was only 60 something.
He had the beard.
Yeah, Major Holly was there, and he saw there was a dresser, and there were 2 checks on it, and it was, and hey, Bean, you know, like there's 2 checks from the Vanguard from 2 years ago, and you never cashed them. He said, yeah, well, Max is having a bad couple of weeks. He didn't cash them. That gives you insight into real character. But anyway, I think there's a spiral. What happens is that you're somebody like Hawkins, who's a king, you know, and all of a sudden other people come on the scene. It could be Stan Getz, it could be later, it could be Sonny, it could be whatever, Coltrane. And then all of a sudden the popularity diminishes, which leads to less work. And those guys, I think they spend a lot of time just playing and hanging, not a lot of, you know, staying home and just practicing or preparation. So everything was like natural. And then when the gigs stop happening and the hang continues and the practice is not quite happening, you get on the gig and you don't sound as good as you can sound. I was fortunate enough to play a little bit with Roy Eldridge when I first came to New York by accident. A friend of mine was playing with Paul Chambers, and it was, believe it or not, this Forest Hotel, they had 2 groups, Roy Eldridge and Roy. So I would play with Paul Chambers guys. It wasn't Paul Chambers at his ultimate, put it that way. And then Roy said, "Hey, why don't you play with me, man?" So, wow. I was always afraid of older musicians. I was afraid that they, you know, intimidated is probably the word. So I would play with him and, you know, do my best. And like, he'd start out the gig, like, you know, the first couple of nights he's not that great, you know, it's like not practicing. And so it's like a spiral. And so I learned that. I said, you know, if I'm not working for a month or 2 months even, I have to keep on trying, you know, and people come over to the house and play it, and just keep the physicality going and all that stuff. So that's my observation. It happened to a lot of guys. Ben Webster, when he was 60, figured he was tired. He was an old man. Time to go. That's fortunately, it's, you know, a lot of people have changed. Like mentioned, Frank West is ultimate, and Jimmy Heath. There was an old saxophone player, I think he just died, with Frank Staton, Dakota Staton's brother. I heard him play last year at some awards party, and he couldn't walk, but he got up on the bench and played beautifully, you know. And so there's hope out there, and like, it's also turning negatives into positives, and all those things fit together. So it's a long road. Toshiko had a tune called Long Yellow Road. So this is a long white road, or any black road, or any kind of road. It's a long musical road, put it that way.
One of the things along this musical journey that I mourn is the paucity of ballads. People don't play ballads like they used to. Is there a greater challenge in playing a ballad than a medium or an up-tempo? What is it? What is the challenge?
There's a lot of challenges. First of all, the reason like a lot of young guys don't play ballads is because they can't get a proper sound. And ballads show everything up, you know what I mean? Like, when I play, I'm constantly aware. I try to tell the younger players how ending the note. You play a note, end of the note is the most important thing, because that's your new one, that's your signature, like you sign your painting, and like you have to allow yourself enough air to be able to finish the note, just not stop it. And I get mad at myself when the air doesn't allow me to, finish the nuance. So that's another thing I want to work on more. But because sound is so important, and story is important to tell. it's more important to express the emotion of the song when it's a ballad, and it's kind of obvious. It's just that you're so exposed. Sometimes I hear a young group or player, somebody asks me to talk to them, and I say, "How come you didn't play any standard tunes?" "Well, we don't have anything to add." I said, "What? But that's who you are. That shows who you are. You play these little songs with these devices, and they all sound the same. Sound like it's something you have to prepare for your lesson at school. You play a tune, people know what the song is. You improvise, they can hear who you are. But they think that you have to alter the changes, you have to alter the harmony. You don't have to alter. You just play the song. And the song is, and you play it, and the song is you. You have to make the song you. It has to become your song. When you're playing a ballad, especially, you play it, and okay, it's written a certain way. I played Daydream last night. I heard Hodges play it, and the way he plays it is different from if you see the lead sheet. I knew that Strayhorn knew what he was going to play pretty much, and so you have to internalize the music, and ballads especially. You have to be able to tell the story, and that's difficult. I want to do more work on that personally. I feel like I'm went a little bit astray in that department, and I have to like reevaluate. I'm always reevaluating stuff and what I have to, and I think that's important because I'm interested in sound all the time. But playing, I remember years ago, Wooten Marsalski. When he was just coming, on the scene in a sense. "Hey man, give me a couple ballads I should work on for my sound." So I did. I don't know if you ever paid attention to it, but or you're just being lip service, trying to. But anyway, that's a great way to develop your sound. Obviously, you play if you can play a faster tempo with a similar sound. That's why Bias is so great. He can maintain the same sound that he played a ballad on at a faster tempo, and that's not so easy.
Yeah. No.
Spacing. Miles is the master in a way. Leaving out enough notes, creating drama. But that's ballads are important. Actually, blues are not that easy either. Slower blues is hard, and that's another thing.
Yeah, we were talking, and you are married to your collaborator. What are the dynamics of being in a relationship with someone and also being in a creative partnership?
It was a little bit difficult at first, in a way. I mean, things started. Well, put it like the bands. Take the big band. It started. I was the instigator, believe it or not, because I never was a big band person. But when we moved to Los Angeles, I kept on being asked to play in these bands, and I didn't like them. They were like guys practicing to become commercial writers. I thought that was a waste of time for me. So I knew she had a few charts, and so I'll call the guys. They had a Union Hall rehearsal space, 50 cents, literally 50 cents, for almost 3 hours. So call people and started working on it, and it was tough for a lot of the musicians. They didn't, they couldn't relate to the music because it wasn't done before. I mean, you can play a Count Basie chart or even Ellington chart, there's a Dizzy Gillespie chart. It's been done. This wasn't done, so how do you play it? Starting from scratch, although it was bebop music basically. But anyway, that was a process, and it evolved, and quite successfully musically, but we had concepts like Toshiko was like a bebop through and through. Her first inspiration was great piano player that
Byrd?
No, I played with, this is pre-bebop, played with Teddy
Wilson?
Teddy Wilson. That was the first jazz record she heard, changed her life as a teenager. But she was really, came quickly into the bebop world. And so first time she heard diminuendo and crescendo, she thought it was noise. Okay. So it's like, it's me and Hawkins. It's kind of like, your ear changes. And so anyway, or sometimes she would write something for me and I couldn't relate to it right away, and I would kind of be a little bit negative. And later on I realized that a lot of times it was just my shortcoming and not being willing to find the story. So I introduced her a little bit more to the pre-bebop world, and so in that way, collaborative thing. And then she wrote some stuff relating to her heritage, and so being again trying to be a narrative player, she writes something and say, well, Toshiko, what's the story? She wrote a thing called Kogan, which was about the Japanese soldier that was a reconnaissance guy in Philippines who didn't know the war was over. So he's there for 30 years. And they finally found him. It's a long story, but she wrote this piece about that in 1972 or something like that, and I wanted her to tell me the story, so when I played my solo, I didn't want to play a little bebop solo, and it's insignificant. So she played the bebop solo, and I'm trying to tell a story when I'm playing the flute, and then I started to investigate shakuhachi world, investigates, listen to some Japanese music and try to get a feeling for the spirit. Japanese music deals in space and stuff. So that became a part of my repertoire, in a sense, that approach. And I've done some stuff. I did a thing with a no performer in Japan 2 years ago. It's on YouTube if you want to check it out. It's to check out Hagoromo, Lew Tabackin. It's a famous no play. But anyway, so collaboration, what you have to realize is you have to stay out of each other's way, in a sense, and that's how it could work. And she utilized me. I was basically, even from the beginning, just a featured soloist. She did arranged a couple of my tunes, but it was basically her project, and I probably played too much, but in the band, but I don't know. I think I was needed for energy-wise or something. And somebody would complain, oh, Tabackin played too many solos, and then when I can't make it for some reason, the guy would say, oh, he missed his, so there's nothing that comes in perfect form, as they say in Japan. But anyway, the collaboration worked, and because I stayed out of her way, and she tried to utilize what I do the best way she could. And so it was, in a sense, I was her Ben Webster or Lester Young or whatever on another level, but, basically.
Yeah. In a non-musical sense, I am a Jewish man who's married to an African-American woman. You're a Jewish man who's married to a Japanese woman. What is it like from your perspective navigating being with someone who's from a completely different culture?
Well, that's not difficult, because put it this way, from a religious perspective, I have no religion. I don't know. I saw Ronald Reagan Jr. doing his push for. I said, I think I should sign up. I always felt religion. I don't have much time for religion, and Buddhism. She's kind of she's not religious, and she has some fatalistic concepts that's subtle, and Buddhism is not exactly religion in a sense that we know it. So we don't have any religious conflict. Cultural conflict, I've learned a little bit, I dealt, Japanese world a fair amount, so I adapted a little of that. And it's so funny, this group, Mark is married to a Japanese woman. And he spent a lot of time in Japan working, and he's very good at language skills and stuff. And so we were in the bandstand, the three of us, and especially when we were in Japan, we communicate in little Japanese code words like, Daijobu, are you okay? And we play, like little, you say dame, don't do that. I mean, it's kind of we have fun with it. And then we're at, so we've all developed some little Japanese kind of reality, because we go there a lot and deal with people, and we have great relationships. But I don't find any real conflict, put it that way, because it's a racial difference doesn't mean anything. The religious difference is not significant.
Relationships are relationships.
Exactly.
You have to work at a relationship.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. It doesn't matter what it is. You could be perfectly matched, religiously, racially, and have a problem. So people are different.
But it must be interesting when you go to Japan, you get a perspective that most people don't get, because you guys are together, and you probably go places and do things that most Westerners don't.
Well, I did a lot of things that she never did, because I used to go to Japan a lot and then hang out after my tours. And then my idea of a vacation was to, do the gig and then go hang out every night and play jam sessions and whatever, and just play without being, totally, not, you're always serious, but, a little lighthearted. And then I would be taken to places that were unbelievable, that, in the middle of Tokyo, there's like a lot of stuff going on that people don't even know about. And, actually, Toshiko lived more in America than any other place, which is interesting. But she's very Japanese. She's probably more Japanese than a lot of Japanese. I don't know if she kind of holds on to it. She doesn't want to be an American citizen. And so it's an interesting reality. But yeah, I mean, I get, you're right, I do get some special attention because being married to Toshiko, because she's like an icon. She's like, beyond the jazz world.
Yeah.
We used to play Birdland every Monday with a big band. So a lot of Japanese come, and a lot of Japanese old ladies would come, and they sit in the front. I don't know if they knew anything about jazz, but they came to see Toshiko. So she's conducting the band. She's playing the piano, jumps up and conducting the band and all this stuff, and they're probably her age, and they can't believe it, and it gives them a lot of inspiration. They don't have to just become like, just disappear. And so it's very inspirational to a lot of people. I've actually almost reached that. I go to play I remember a few years ago I was playing in Groningen, Holland, and they added I was playing with this Rijn de Graaf trio, and they added a younger tenor player, Don Braden, So all these old guys are in the corner, and they've heard me through the years. Now I'm in my 70s, and they're waiting for me to fall apart, but I know how to pace I can play with young guys, and I know how to suck them in, and I have no problem. In fact, I prefer playing with younger guys, because I feel like when I play with older guys, I feel like I have to be too gentle, I feel like too much respect. But if I play with young guys, I'm cool, and I can just go, do it. So they're looking at me and say, wow, he says, you still can, they thought I would be fall apart at the age of 73 or whatever it was. But it's funny.
How are we doing on time? What time is it?
Oh, it's 10 minutes to 12, something like that.
Okay, so let's
Okay.
a little bit more. We'll close it up. Let me just shorter answers. I'll just name some people and you say something about them. Randy Brecker.
Oh, I love Randy Brecker. We have a rapport. We first played, we're about 5 years apart, but we played in some youth thing in Philadelphia. So we did a little concert and we were put together. He was 15, I think, and I was 20. He could play the Miles's solos on Kind of Blue, and he was into Lee Morgan, and his father. Through the years, we played together a lot. We had a certain, no matter, we don't play as much as we used to, but whenever we play, it's like it's still there. His father used to come up to me and say, "Boy, I love it when you and Randy play together because that's the way I like to hear him play." So his father was a music fan and amateur musician. So yeah, Randy, he's like kind of a brother.
Michael Brecker.
I knew Michael when he came to New York as a young man, and he would come to New York and visit. Randy and I were playing in Duke Pearson's band, and he'd come by and ask me questions about little technical questions and stuff. But then he moved to New York, and we'd hang out, try mouthpieces and stuff. He's like both of them were incredibly gifted, players. Michael comes from another world. He's 5 years. I think he's 5 years younger than Randy, but his aesthetic was totally different than Randy's. He came from, a post bebop world, and free jazz, and then into, I don't know what more contemporary stuff, whatever it was. So I mean, he was, incredibly gifted and important player.
Joe Farrell.
Joe Farrell was like he was kind of a mentor in a way, in a strange kind of way. Was when I first came to New York, and I sat in with Elvin. He was playing with Elvin, and Elvin kind of liked me, and so he had, Joe send me in when he couldn't do it, and then Joe said, "Hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you suffer me in Thad and Mel's band?" Which I did, and then Eddie Daniels said, "Oh, do this. Why don't you do the same for me?" So I was playing both sides of the fence, which was great for me because my reading skills weren't great, but it was a, really great experience. I never forgot the first time one of the first times I played, they were playing this tune, and I'm reading the changes. So Thad would just stop the band. I said, "Oh man, did I fuck this up?" So they had to stop the band, and I didn't realize that's what he did. So I had enough chutzpah, if that's the right word, to keep on playing, and then but it was great. It was a great experience. And I'd hang out with Joe. We'd go to clubs. I'd always have my horn, and he'd say, "Hey man, why don't you go play with that guy?" He egged me on, and I go up on the bandstand, and I'm playing, and I look up, and Sonny Rollins is there. I said, "Now I knew he set me up really good." And he didn't like a lot of people. He was a little standoffish, maybe arrogant, if the word, but he liked me for some reason, and we got along really well. And he was a wonderful player, and he had his problems, and unfortunately, but yeah, he was special.
Clark Terry.
We talked about him earlier. He was a kind of a mentor in a way too. I learned a lot from him by listening to him. And, fortunate enough to do some gigs with him, not just in the big band, the smaller band. And Clark Terry's thing was like, he played so great that the downside of it was that it didn't matter what he played. So he'd have a big band or something, didn't always play the the best charts, or it didn't matter, or the best sideman in certain situations, because he was so great. He didn't need anything, and like, but yeah, you know, like probably the greatest breathing apparatus in the history of brass players or any kind of players. I use him as an example. I try to tell somebody, you're not breathing. You have to breathe from the diaphragm, and you know, you look at Clark Terry, man. He could not play for a month and then pick up the horn, and when he was recovering from cancer, you know, playing the Vanguard. Randy and I went there to support him. Fattest too, and Casey, he'd just been operated on and chemotherapy, all kinds of stuff, and he wasn't even attached. You know, so he's up sitting on his stool, his head shaved, looks really fine. He's playing great. So we're up there. He doesn't need us, you know. Now he was really incredible.
Okay,